forest exploded with gunfire before Damien Ashgrave even saw the shooters. He felt the first shot graze his shoulder, a burning line of pain that told him instantly what kind of bullet had struck him. Not lead, silver. The metal that could kill a wolf like him faster than any blade. He dropped low, rolling behind a fallen tree as 3 more shots tore through the bark above his head. His pack had been ambushed on a routine patrol near the northern border, and now half his guards were scattered, fighting for their lives against hunters who had clearly been waiting for this exact moment. Damien pressed a hand to his wound, feeling the poison already spreading beneath his skin, slowing his heartbeat, dimming his strength. He needed distance. He needed to get away before the silver reached his heart. He forced himself up and ran, weaving through the trees with what strength remained, until the forest thinned and a small cottage appeared ahead, its windows glowing with warm candlelight. He did not know who lived there. He did not care. His vision was already beginning to blur at the edges, and his legs were growing heavier with every step. He reached the door and collapsed against it, and the last thing he remembered before the world went dark was the sound of it opening. Elena Voss had been grinding dried chamomile into powder when she heard the knock, if it could even be called that. It sounded more like a body falling. She opened the door and found a man collapsed on her doorstep, blood soaking through his shirt, his skin far too pale. She did not scream. She did not hesitate. Years of tending to injured travelers who passed through Ashwood Hollow had taught her to act first and feel fear later. She dragged him inside, surprised by how heavy he was, and laid him across the wooden floor near the fire. When she tore open his shirt to look at the wound, she noticed something strange. The edges of the injury were black, as if the wound itself were rejecting something inside it. She had never seen anything like it. She grabbed her tweezers and worked carefully, and after a moment of digging, she pulled out a small metal fragment, gleaming silver in the firelight. The moment the fragment left his body, the man's eyes snapped open, and they were not human eyes. They glowed amber, sharp and animal, staring at her with a mixture of shock and something like relief. Elena froze for only a second. Then she reached for a clean cloth and pressed it to his wound. "You are hurt," she said simply. "That is all that matters right now." Damien stared at her, waiting for the scream, the fear, the horror that most humans showed when they saw his eyes shift. It did not come. Instead, she worked steadily, cleaning the wound, wrapping it with practiced hands, her expression calm as a still lake. "Who are you?" he managed to ask, his voice rough. "Elena," she said, "and you are bleeding all over my floor, so please stop talking and let me finish." Despite the pain, something in him wanted to laugh. He had not expected humor. He had not expected calm. He had expected fear, because that was what most people offered him, whether they knew what he was or not. There was an authority in his presence that made ordinary people shrink back. But this woman treated him like any other wounded traveler who had stumbled through her door. By the time she finished bandaging him, the color had returned to his face, and his strength was slowly building again. He sat up against the wall, watching her clean her hands in a basin of water. "You should be more careful," she said, without looking at him. "Whoever did this to you was not playing games. That fragment I pulled out was silver. I do not know what you are, but I know that silver does not belong inside a person." Damien studied her carefully. She had noticed. She had seen his eyes shift, had pulled a hunter's bullet from his body, and yet she spoke as if this were simply another Tuesday evening. "You are not afraid," he said. "Should I be?" she asked, finally meeting his gaze. "Most people are." Elena shrugged. "Fear does not heal wounds. Curiosity might, eventually, but right now you need rest, not questions." Damien allowed himself to lean back against the wall, exhaustion pulling at him despite his racing thoughts. He studied the small cottage, filled with drying herbs hanging from the ceiling, jars of tinctures lined along shelves, a single candle flickering by the window. This was not the home of someone who feared the unknown. This was the home of someone who spent her life healing whatever came through her door, no matter how strange. He drifted into a light sleep, and when he woke hours later, dawn was breaking outside the window. Elena sat nearby, mending a torn cloth, glancing at him every few minutes to check his breathing. "You should go before anyone sees you," she said when she noticed he was awake. "If those hunters are still searching, you do not want them finding you here." Damien rose slowly, testing his strength. The wound had already begun to heal, faster than any human injury would, but he still felt weaker than usual. "Thank you," he said. "I do not say that easily." "Then do not waste it on me," she said, though there was a small smile tugging at her lips. "Just be careful next time. I do not have an endless supply of clean bandages." Damien left before the sun fully rose, disappearing into the tree line. but he found himself glancing back at the cottage more than once. Something about the woman inside it lingered in his mind long after he returned to his territory, where his guards were waiting anxiously, relieved to see him alive. Corwin, his beta and oldest friend, rushed to his side the moment he stepped through the boundary stones that marked Packland. "We thought we lost you," Corwin said, his eyes scanning Damien's wound with concern. "What happened? Where were you?" "A human helped me," Damien said. "She pulled the silver out and treated the wound like it was nothing unusual." Corwin's expression shifted from relief to caution. "A human who saw your eyes change and did not run. That is either very brave or very dangerous, Damien. You know what happens when humans learn about us. Fear turns into hunting parties faster than you would expect. She is not like that," Damien said, though even he was not sure how he knew this so quickly. "You barely know her," Corwin pointed out. "I know enough," Damien replied, and something in his tone told Corwin the conversation was over, at least for now. Over the following days, the pack worked to identify the hunters who had ambushed them. Scouts reported strange markings carved into trees near the northern border, symbols the pack elders recognized as belonging to a group that had not been active in decades. Whoever attacked Damien was organized, patient, and clearly prepared with weapons designed specifically to kill wolves. Despite the danger closing in around his territory, Damien found his thoughts returning again and again to the small cottage at the edge of Ashwood Hollow, and the woman who had shown him kindness without asking for anything in return. He told himself it was simple curiosity. He told himself it was nothing more than gratitude for a debt he intended to repay. But as the days passed and the memory of her calm voice refused to fade, he began to suspect that something more complicated had already taken root in his chest. Something that had nothing to do with the wound she had healed and everything to do with the woman who had healed it. Elena, meanwhile, could not stop thinking about the stranger who had collapsed on her doorstep. She had seen many injuries in her years as the town's herbalist, but nothing like the way his eyes had shifted color, nothing like the way his wound had rejected the silver fragment as if his very body knew it was poison. She told herself it did not matter. Strange things happen sometimes, and she was in the business of healing, not questioning. But that night, as she lay in bed listening to the wind move through the trees outside her window, she found herself wondering if she would ever see him again, and surprising herself with how much she hoped that she would. Neither of them yet understood how deeply their lives were about to become tangled together, nor how much danger was already gathering on the horizon, waiting for the moment it would force them both to choose sides in a war neither of them had asked to be part of. 3 days later, Damien found himself walking the edge of Ashwood Hollow again, telling himself it was simply to check on the human witness who had seen too much. He told himself this even as his heart beat faster with every step closer to her cottage. Elena was outside gathering herbs when she spotted him approaching, and she straightened immediately, brushing dirt from her hands. "You look better," she said, studying him. "Did you actually rest, or did you push yourself the moment you got home?" "I rested," he said, which was mostly true. "Mostly," she repeated, raising an eyebrow. That word is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Damien found himself smiling despite the tension still coiled in his chest from the recent attack. There was something disarming about her directness, the way she spoke to him without any of the careful deference his own people showed him daily. "I came to thank you properly," he said, "and to make sure you were not bothered by anyone asking questions about that night." "No one has asked anything," she said. "Should I be worried?" Damien hesitated, weighing how much to tell her. The hunters who attacked him were dangerous, and if they somehow connected Elena to his survival, she could become a target herself. But looking at her steady expression, he realized she deserved honesty, even if the truth complicated things further. "There are people who hunt others like me," he said carefully. "If they learn you helped me, it could put you in danger." Elena considered this for a long moment, her expression thoughtful rather than fearful. "Then I suppose you should visit less often, so no one notices a pattern." "Is that your way of telling me to stay away?" he asked, unable to keep a note of disappointment from his voice. "It is my way of telling you to be smarter about it," she said, a small smile returning to her lips. "I did not say stop visiting. I said be careful." Something warm settled in Damien's chest at her words, something he had not expected to feel so soon after nearly losing his life. He stayed longer that afternoon than he had planned, helping her gather herbs while she explained their uses, listening as she spoke about the town and its people with genuine affection. By the time he left, the sun had begun to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and Damien walked back toward his territory with a lightness in his steps that had nothing to do with his healing wound. Corwin noticed the change in him immediately upon his return, The way his expression seemed softer, his shoulders less burdened by the weight of leadership for just a moment. "You went back to see her," Corwin said, not really asking. "I did," Damien admitted. Corwin studied his friend carefully, concern flickering behind his eyes. "Damien, I understand there is something drawing you to her, but you must remember what is happening around us. The hunters who attacked you are not finished. If they learn about your connection to a human, they may use her against you." "I know the risk," Damien said quietly. "I have thought of little else since I left her cottage." "Then why continue seeing her?" Corwin asked. Damien was quiet for a long moment before answering, his eyes fixed on the darkening horizon. "Because for the first time in longer than I can remember, someone looked at me and saw a person, not a king, not a threat, not a legend, just someone who needed help. I do not know how to walk away from that." Corwin said nothing further, though the worry remained etched across his face. He understood loyalty, understood duty, but he also understood that matters of the heart rarely followed the careful strategies of pack politics, and that worried him more than any hunter's silver ever could. Meanwhile, deep in the forest beyond the northern border, the hunters who had ambushed Damien regrouped in a hidden camp, studying maps and reports gathered by their scouts. Their leader, a sharp-eyed man named Kane Marshall, listened carefully as one of his men described the wolf who had escaped their trap, and the direction he had fled. "He ran toward Ashwood Hollow," the scout reported. "We lost his trail near the edge of town, but there were signs he may have received help from someone there." Kane's eyes narrowed with interest. A human helping a wolf. That would certainly complicate things, but it might also give us exactly the leverage we need. Find out who lives on that side of town. If someone is protecting him, we may have found our way to catch him without another failed ambush. The scout nodded and disappeared back into the trees, and Kane allowed himself a slow, calculating smile. He had been hunting wolves for over a decade, and he knew that every legend had a weakness. Perhaps this Wolf King's weakness was closer to home than anyone realized. As the sun set over Ashwood Hollow that evening, neither Elena nor Damien yet knew that their growing connection had already caught the attention of dangerous eyes that would soon begin watching every step Elena took, waiting for the perfect moment to turn her simple kindness into a weapon against the very man she had saved. For now, though, Elena returned to her cottage, humming softly as she prepared dinner, unaware of the storm quietly gathering on the horizon. And across the forest, Damien sat beneath the stars, thinking of amber candlelight and steady hands, and wondering how he had allowed himself to fall so quickly for someone who did not yet know the full truth of what he was, or the danger that now shadowed her simple, quiet life. The days that followed brought a strange sense of normalcy to Ashwood Hollow. Though beneath the surface, tension continued to build. Elena noticed small things that unsettled her, though she could not quite name why. Footprints near her garden that did not belong to any of the townsfolk. A stranger who lingered a little too long near the market stalls, watching her more than the goods for sale. She dismissed these as coincidences at first, telling herself that a small town like Ashwood Hollow naturally attracted travelers passing through. But when she found a torn piece of cloth caught on her fence post one morning, dark and unfamiliar in its weave, a small knot of unease settled in her stomach. She said nothing to anyone, not wanting to seem paranoid over what could easily be nothing at all. Still, she found herself glancing over her shoulder more often as she walked to the market, and locking her door a little more carefully each night. Damien, sensing something shift in the air though he could not identify its source, found himself drawn back toward Ashwood Hollow more frequently than caution advised. He told himself each visit would be brief, simply checking that all remained well, yet each time he found reasons to stay longer, drawn in by conversations that stretched from afternoon into evening, by the comfortable silence that settled between them as they worked side by side, preparing remedies for the town's sick and injured. It was during one such evening, as the sky turned deep violet and the first stars began to appear, that Elena finally voiced the question that had been building in her mind since the night she first pulled Silver from his shoulder. "What are you, exactly?" she asked, setting down the herbs she had been sorting. "I have seen your eyes change. I have felt how quickly you healed from a wound that should have taken weeks to close. You are not simply a man who wandered too close to hunters with strange weapons." Damien set down the jar he had been holding, considering how much to reveal. He had avoided this conversation, uncertain how she would react to the full truth, worried that even her remarkable calm might finally break beneath the weight of what he truly was. "I am not entirely human," he admitted finally. "My people call ourselves wolves, though we walk as men and women most of the time. I lead them. I am what you might call their king." Elena absorbed this information slowly, her expression thoughtful rather than shocked. Somehow, despite the strangeness of his words, they settled into place beside everything she had already witnessed, filling gaps she had not realized existed. "And the men who attacked you," she said. "They know what you are." "They hunt my kind specifically," Damien confirmed. "They use silver because it is one of the few things capable of truly harming us. The wound you treated was caused by a bullet forged with silver at its core." Elena was quiet for a long moment, processing this new understanding of the world around her, a world far stranger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined it to be. "Why are they hunting you?" she finally asked. "What started this?" Damien's expression darkened slightly. "A war between our peoples that began generations before either of us were born. Old grievances, old fears, passed down until neither side quite remembers how it started, only that it continues." "That seems like a terrible way to live," Elena said softly. "Fighting a war you did not begin, that you may not even fully understand the reasons for. It is the only way we have known," Damien admitted. "Though lately, I find myself wondering if there might be another path forward, one that does not require constant bloodshed between our kinds." Elena studied him carefully, sensing the weight behind his words, the exhaustion of a man who carried responsibility for far more than himself. "Perhaps you simply have not met the right people to show you that other path exists," she said quietly. Damien met her gaze, something warm and fragile passing between them in the quiet evening air. "Perhaps I have already begun to," he said. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken understanding, before Elena cleared her throat and returned her attention to the herbs before her, though a small smile remained on her lips. "We should finish preparing these remedies before the light fades completely," she said, though her voice carried less certainty than her words suggested. Damien agreed, though neither of them moved quite as efficiently as before, both distracted by the conversation that had passed between them, by the truth now shared and accepted without fear or rejection. As darkness fully settled over Ashwood Hollow, Damien eventually rose to leave, lingering at the doorway a moment longer than necessary. "Be careful," Elena said, echoing words he had once spoken to her. "Whatever is happening between your people, I do not want you walking into danger unprepared." "I will be careful," he promised, though even as he spoke the words, a strange chill passed through him, an instinct honed over years of leadership that whispered danger was already closer than either of them realized. He did not know, as he disappeared into the darkness of the forest, that unfamiliar eyes watched from the shadows beyond Elena's garden, cataloging every detail of his visit, every word that could be overheard, every piece of information that could later be used against them both. Cain Marshall's scouts had been patient, methodical in their observation, and what they reported back to their leader that night sent a spark of dark excitement through the hunter's calculating mind. The Wolf King was not simply passing through Ashwood Hollow. He was returning, again and again, to the same human woman, spending hours in her company, sharing secrets that should have remained hidden. "This changes everything," Cain murmured to himself, studying the reports laid before him. "If the king cares for this woman, then she becomes the key to everything we have been trying to accomplish. Not another failed ambush in the forest, but something far more precise, far more certain to succeed." He began planning immediately, mapping out Elena's daily routine based on his scout's observations, identifying the moments she was most vulnerable, the paths she walked alone, the hours when Damien was not present to protect her. Every hunter in his command had failed to bring down the Wolf King through direct confrontation. Perhaps, Cain reasoned, the answer had never been confrontation at all, but leverage, patience, and the careful exploitation of a weakness the king himself did not yet realize he had exposed. As night deepened over the hidden hunter's camp, Cain allowed himself a slow, satisfied smile, already envisioning the moment his carefully laid plans would finally bring the elusive Alpha King within his grasp, using nothing more than the one thing that seemed capable of making him careless: love for someone who did not yet understand the danger she now carried, simply by caring for him in return. Neither Elena nor Damien yet suspected how closely they were being watched, nor how quickly the fragile piece of their growing connection was about to be tested by forces neither of them had the power to control alone. The dream came again that night, more vivid than it had ever been before. Elena stood in a forest unlike any she had seen in her waking life, ancient trees stretching so high their tops disappeared into a silver mist. A full moon hung low in the sky, larger than any moon should be, casting everything in a pale blue light. She was not alone. A woman stood before her, features blurred as if seen through water, yet somehow familiar in a way Elena could not explain. "You carry the mark," the woman said, her voice echoing strangely, layered as though many voices spoke at once. "When the time comes, you will remember what you were always meant to be." Elena tried to ask what she meant, but her voice would not form the words. She looked down at her own hands and found claws where her fingers should have been, silver light rippling beneath her skin, like moonlight on water. She woke with a gasp, her heart pounding, sweat cooling on her forehead despite the chill of the night air. She sat up in bed, pressing a hand to her chest, willing her breathing to slow. It had felt so real, more real than any dream had a right to feel. She glanced instinctively at her wrist, where a small birthmark had rested since childhood, shaped like a crescent moon. To her shock, it seemed to glow faintly in the darkness before fading back to its usual pale color. She stared at it for a long moment, unsettled in a way she could not fully explain. She had always known the mark was there, had never given it much thought beyond its unusual shape. Her grandmother used to trace it gently with one finger when Elena was a child, murmuring words in a language Elena never recognized, always followed by the same soft instruction: "Keep this hidden, child. Some things are safer left unseen." Elena had never questioned those words as a girl. Now, lying awake in the darkness with her heart still racing from the dream, she found herself wishing she had asked more questions while her grandmother was still alive to answer them. She did not mention the dream to Damien when he visited the following afternoon, uncertain how to explain something she barely understood herself. Instead, she focused on preparing a poultice for one of the town elders who had injured his ankle, grateful for the distraction of familiar work. Damien noticed her distraction anyway, his sharp senses picking up the faint change in her heartbeat, the slight hesitation in her movements that had not been present during previous visits. "Something is troubling you," he observed, watching her carefully as she measured dried herbs into a small bowl. "It is nothing important," she said, though her tone lacked its usual conviction. Damien did not press further, though concern lingered behind his eyes. He had learned enough about Elena in their short time together to recognize when she was choosing not to share something, and he respected her enough not to force the matter, even as instinct whispered that whatever troubled her mattered more than she was willing to admit. Meanwhile, deep within Pack territory, Damien's seer, an elderly woman named Marin who had served 3 generations of Ashgrave kings, felt a strange disturbance ripple through the air one evening as she meditated beside the sacred fire that burned at the heart of Packland. She had spent decades attuned to the subtle currents of magic that flowed through the forest, currents most Pack members could not perceive at all, and what she felt that night unsettled her deeply. "Something ancient stirs," she murmured to herself, staring into the flickering flames as if they might reveal more. "Something that has slept for a very long time." She said nothing to Damien immediately, uncertain what the disturbance meant or where it originated, though she resolved to watch carefully for any further signs. In her long years of service, she had learned that ancient magic rarely announced itself without reason, and reasons of that nature were rarely simple. Elena's dreams continued over the following nights, each one revealing fragments of a story she did not recognize as her own, yet which felt undeniably true in ways she could not logically explain. She saw glimpses of a great conflict fought long ago, wolves and humans locked in bitter opposition, until a small group of humans emerged who possessed the ability to shield wolves from harm, absorbing Silver's poison into their own bodies without lasting damage. These humans became known as wardens, sworn protectors bound to specific wolf bloodlines through ancient pacts that spanned generations. In one particularly vivid dream, Elena watched as a warden stood before an alpha king, remarkably similar in bearing to Damien, though clearly from a different era, judging by the style of clothing and the ancient tools carried by those around them. The warden extended her palm, and silver light flowed between her hand and the king's chest, drawing poison from a wound before it could claim his life. Elena woke from this particular dream with her own palm tingling, as though echoing sensations from a memory that was not truly hers. She examined her hand carefully in the morning light, half expecting to see some visible change, though nothing appeared different beyond the usual lines and calluses earned from years of grinding herbs and gathering plants. She finally decided to visit her grandmother's old cottage on the edge of town, a place she had avoided since the elderly woman's passing several years prior, unable to face the emptiness of rooms that once held so much warmth and wisdom. The cottage remained exactly as she had left it, dust settling over furniture and shelves, though Elena had returned occasionally to maintain the structure and prevent it from falling into complete disrepair. She searched through her grandmother's belongings with a determination she had not expected to feel, drawn by an instinct she could not fully articulate. Eventually she discovered a small wooden box hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the bedroom, its surface carved with symbols that matched nothing she recognized from any book she had studied. Inside, she found a folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age, along with a small silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon, identical to the birthmark on her wrist. The parchment contained handwriting she recognized as her grandmother's, though the words were written in a language she could not read, filled with the same strange symbols carved into the box. Elena sat on the dusty floor of her grandmother's abandoned cottage, holding the pendant in one hand and the parchment in the other, questions multiplying faster than she could process them. Why had her grandmother kept this hidden? What did these symbols mean? And why did the pendant feel warm against her palm, as though responding to something within her own blood? She brought both items back to her own cottage that evening, placing them carefully on her bedside table, unable to shake the feeling that she stood on the edge of understanding something significant about herself, something her grandmother had spent years carefully concealing. When Damien visited again several days later, he noticed the pendant immediately, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of it resting innocently among Elena's belongings. "Where did you find that?" he asked, his voice carrying a note of urgency that surprised her. "My grandmother's cottage," Elena said, studying his reaction carefully. "Do you recognize it?" Damien picked up the pendant carefully, examining the craftsmanship, the ancient symbols etched into its surface. "My people have stories about pendants like this," he said slowly, "passed down through legends about protectors who once stood beside wolf kings during a great conflict, humans who could absorb silver's poison and shield us from harm. I always believed they were simply stories, exaggerations passed down through generations to comfort us during difficult times." Elena's heart began to race, memories of her recent dreams flooding back with new clarity. "I have been dreaming about a conflict," she admitted quietly, "about people who could do exactly what you just described. I thought they were only dreams, strange and vivid, but nothing more." Damien studied her carefully, something shifting behind his amber eyes as pieces began to align in ways he had not previously considered. "Elena," he said carefully, "do you know anything about your family history beyond your grandmother?" Elena shook her head slowly. "My grandmother raised me after my parents passed when I was very young. She never spoke much about our family's origins, only that some things were safer left hidden, and that I should never draw unnecessary attention to myself." A heavy silence settled between them as the implications of this revelation began to take shape. Damien carefully set down the pendant, his expression thoughtful and slightly troubled. "I think we should speak with my seer," he said finally. "Marin has sensed something unusual recently, some disturbance she could not fully explain. Perhaps this is connected to whatever she felt." Elena agreed, though anxiety twisted in her stomach at the thought of what such answers might reveal. She had spent her entire life believing herself simply human, ordinary, in every way beyond her skill with herbs and remedies. The possibility that something far stranger ran through her blood left her feeling unsteady, as though the ground beneath her had shifted without warning. They arranged to meet with Marin the following evening, and as Damien prepared to leave, he paused at the doorway, studying Elena with an expression that mixed concern and something deeper, something that had been growing steadily since the night she first pulled silver from his wounded shoulder. "Whatever this reveals," he said quietly, "it does not change who you are to me. I want you to know that, regardless of what Marin discovers." Elena felt warmth spread through her chest at his words, though uncertainty still lingered beneath the surface. "Thank you," she said softly, "though I admit, I am not entirely sure what I am anymore." "You are still Elena," he said simply. "Whatever else you may discover about your past, that much remains unchanged." After he left, Elena sat alone with the pendant clutched in her palm, staring at the ancient parchment she still could not read, wondering what tomorrow's meeting would reveal about a heritage she had never known existed, and how deeply it might already be entangled with the dangerous conflict unfolding around the man she had grown to care for, far more than she had ever intended. Outside, unseen in the darkness beyond her garden, one of Kane's scouts recorded every detail of Damien's extended visit, noting the tension in his posture as he left, the unusual object he had examined so carefully in the candlelight. Kane would find this information most useful indeed, another piece fitting neatly into the trap he continued to construct with patient, calculated precision. The following morning brought an unexpected visitor to Ashwood Hollow, a stranger who claimed to be a traveling merchant seeking herbs for a sick relative in a neighboring village. Elena, still distracted by the previous night's revelations, welcomed him into her cottage without suspicion, offering tea while she gathered the remedies he requested. The stranger's eyes wandered the room as she worked, lingering a moment too long on the pendant she had left on a nearby shelf, though Elena did not notice his interest, too absorbed in measuring the correct proportions of healing herbs. He asked casual questions about her life in Ashwood Hollow, about visitors she might have received recently, about strange occurrences in the surrounding forest. Elena answered honestly, seeing no reason for caution with someone who seemed simply curious about local life, unaware that every word she spoke was being carefully catalogued for a purpose far more troubling than casual conversation. By the time the stranger left, thanking her warmly for her assistance, he carried with him confirmation of everything Kane needed to finalize his plans. That evening, as Elena prepared to meet with Damien and travel to see his seer, she had no way of knowing that the net Kane had been carefully weaving around her was now nearly complete, nor that the coming days would test not only her understanding of her own identity, but the very safety of everyone she had come to care about since the night a wounded stranger first collapsed upon her doorstep. By the time Elena reached the edge of Pact territory the following evening, escorted quietly by Damien along a path few humans had ever walked, she could feel the weight of unfamiliar eyes even though she saw no one watching. She dismissed the feeling as simple nerves, telling herself that meeting an ancient seer to discuss whether she carried the blood of long-forgotten protectors was reason enough to feel unsettled. Maren waited for them beside the sacred fire, her weathered face illuminated by flickering orange light, her eyes sharp despite her advanced age. She studied Elena for a long moment before speaking, her gaze lingering on the pendant now hanging from a cord around Elena's neck. "So you are the one the currents have been whispering about," Maren said, her voice carrying the weight of decades spent listening to things others could not hear. "Come closer, child. Let me see what sleeps within you." Elena approached hesitantly, feeling strangely exposed beneath the old woman's scrutiny. Maren reached out and gently took Elena's wrist, examining the crescent moon birthmark with careful, practiced fingers. "This mark is old," Maren murmured, "older than any bloodline currently living among the Pacts. I have read about symbols like this in texts passed down from my predecessors, texts describing wardens who once walked beside our kings during the great conflict that nearly destroyed both our peoples." "What happened to them?" Damien asked, watching the exchange with quiet intensity. "Why do none exist today?" Maren's expression grew somber. When peace finally came, many wardens chose to disappear rather than remain caught between two worlds that no longer needed their sacrifice in the same way. Some hid their bloodlines deliberately, fearing that future conflicts might force their descendants into danger once again. "It seems," she said, turning back to Elena, "that your family made exactly this choice, generations ago." Elena absorbed this information slowly, pieces of her strange dreams finally beginning to form a coherent picture. "My grandmother always told me some things were safer left hidden," she said quietly. "I always thought she meant simple things, family secrets, nothing of this magnitude." "She was protecting you," Maren said gently. "Protecting a bloodline that carries abilities most humans could never imagine possessing. But bloodlines like yours do not remain dormant forever, especially not when fate places you directly in the path of someone who needs exactly what your ancestors once provided." Damien's jaw tightened at these words, understanding settling over him with uncomfortable clarity. "You believe Elena's connection to me is not simply chance," he said. "I believe very little happens by simple chance," Maren replied. "The currents brought you to her doorstep the very night hunters nearly ended your life. That is not coincidence, Alpha. That is destiny finding its way forward, regardless of how carefully your ancestors tried to bury it." Elena felt overwhelmed by the implications settling around her, the weight of a destiny she had never asked for pressing down with sudden, undeniable force. "I do not know how to be what you are describing," she admitted. "I am simply a healer. I do not know anything about protecting wolves from silver." Maren's expression softened slightly, understanding the fear beneath Elena's words. "Abilities like these often remain dormant until circumstances demand their emergence," she explained. "You may not fully understand your own capabilities yet, but that does not mean they are absent. When the moment comes, if it comes, I believe you will find you know more than you currently realize." The conversation continued late into the evening, Maren sharing what fragments of history she knew about the ancient wardens, their abilities, their sacrifices, while Damien listened with growing concern for what this revelation might mean for Elena's safety moving forward. If hunters like Kane learned about her true nature, the danger surrounding her would multiply far beyond anything she currently faced as simply a human connected to the Wolf King. As they finally prepared to return to Ashwood Hollow that night, Damien pulled Elena aside, his expression serious in the moonlight filtering through the trees. "Elena," he said carefully, "I think it would be wise for you to remain closer to Pact territory for the time being. Whatever you are, whatever destiny Maren believes is unfolding, it makes you a target in ways I had not previously considered. I do not want to risk your safety by leaving you exposed in town alone." Elena felt conflicted at this suggestion, torn between the practical wisdom of his concern and her reluctance to abandon the life and responsibilities she had built in Ashwood Hollow. "I have patients who depend on me," she said. I cannot simply disappear without explanation. I understand, Damien said, but please, be more cautious than before. Trust your instincts if something feels wrong, and do not hesitate to send word if you need assistance. Elena agreed, though unease continued to settle in her stomach as they parted ways that night, each returning to their respective homes with minds heavy with new understanding and mounting concern. Unbeknownst to either of them, Kane had already finalized his plans, his patience finally rewarded with everything he needed to set his trap in motion. His scouts had confirmed Elena's growing importance to the Alpha King, had mapped her daily routines with meticulous precision, and had recently reported the unusual object she now wore around her neck, along with her recent late-night journey into Pact territory itself. This complicates things somewhat, Kane mused to his second-in-command, a hardened hunter named Grady who had served alongside him for many years. If she is more than simply human, our approach may require adjustment. Grady frowned thoughtfully. What do you suggest? Kane considered the question carefully, his mind working through various strategies with the same cold precision he applied to every hunt. Whatever she is, she clearly matters to the king. That remains our greatest advantage. Whether she possesses unusual abilities or not, using her to draw him into a controlled situation remains our best path forward. We simply need to ensure we are prepared for any surprises she might present. Over the following days, Kane's men began tightening their surveillance around Ashwood Hollow, growing bolder in their observation as their plans neared completion. Elena noticed the increased presence of unfamiliar faces around town, strangers who lingered too long near her cottage, watched her a little too closely as she went about her daily errands. She mentioned her concerns to Damien during his next visit, describing the unfamiliar faces that seemed to appear with unusual frequency. I do not like this, Damien said, his expression darkening as he listened to her description. This sounds like more than simple coincidence. I thought perhaps I was imagining things, Elena admitted, but it has happened enough times now that I cannot dismiss it easily. Damien resolved to increase pack patrols around the perimeter of Ashwood Hollow, though he was careful to keep this precaution subtle, not wanting to alert whoever might be watching that their surveillance had been noticed. He also began teaching Elena basic techniques for sensing danger, simple methods that even humans could learn to heighten their awareness of potential threats. Trust your instincts, he told her during one such lesson, as they walked slowly through the forest surrounding her cottage. If something feels wrong, even if you cannot explain exactly why, do not ignore that feeling. Instincts exist for good reason. Elena absorbed his guidance carefully, grateful for his concern even as anxiety continued building within her about what exactly they were preparing against. The strange dreams continued each night, growing more vivid, more detailed, as though something within her was slowly awakening in response to the danger gathering around them both. One evening, as Elena walked home from tending to an elderly patient on the far side of town, she noticed a figure following at a distance, keeping just far enough back to avoid immediate suspicion, yet close enough that she could sense his presence clearly. She quickened her pace slightly, testing whether the figure would match her speed, and when he did, cold certainty settled over her that Damien's warnings had not been unfounded. She reached her cottage safely that evening, though her hands trembled slightly as she bolted the door behind her, understanding for the first time just how real and immediate the danger surrounding her had become. She sent word to Damien immediately through the small signal system he had arranged with her, a simple lantern placed in her window that pack scouts would notice during their patrols. Damien arrived within the hour, his expression grim as Elena described the figure who had followed her through town. This cannot continue, he said, pacing her small cottage with barely contained frustration. I should have insisted you remain closer to Pact territory from the beginning. I will not risk your safety any further. Elena, despite her fear, felt a flicker of stubborn resolve rising within her. I cannot simply hide away and abandon everything I have built here, she said firmly. But perhaps there is a compromise. Increased caution, better preparation, without completely surrendering my life to fear. Damien studied her for a long moment, torn between his instinct to protect her completely and his respect for her determination to maintain control over her own choices. We will find a way to keep you safe without stripping away everything that matters to you, he finally said. But please, promise me you will be more careful moving forward. I do not think I could bear losing you now, not after everything we have already discovered about who you might truly be. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest despite the fear still coursing through her veins, touched by the depth of concern evident in his voice. I promise, she said softly. Though I hope you understand, whatever happens, I do not intend to simply stand aside while danger surrounds the people I care about. Something shifted in Damien's expression at her words, admiration mixing with growing affection as he studied the woman before him. unaware of just how soon her courage would be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Outside, hidden in the shadows beyond her garden, Kane's men continued their patient surveillance, satisfied that their carefully constructed trap was nearly ready to spring, waiting only for the perfect moment to force both the Alpha King and his mysterious human companion into the confrontation Kane had spent years preparing to finally win. The following week brought a strange stillness to Ashwood Hollow, the kind of quiet that Elena had learned to distrust rather than welcome. No more strangers lingered near the market, no more footprints appeared near her garden. Even Damien's scouts reported nothing unusual during their patrols along the forest border. Yet the calm did nothing to ease the tension that had settled permanently into Elena's shoulders since the night she noticed herself being followed. Damien visited less frequently during this period, though not from lack of desire. He explained during one visit that pack matters demanded increasing attention, whispers of unrest among neighboring territories, reports of hunter activity spreading beyond their usual range. Elena understood the necessity, though she missed the easy warmth of his more frequent company, the comfortable rhythm they had built together over recent weeks. During one such visit, as autumn winds began stripping leaves from the trees surrounding her cottage, Elena finally worked up the courage to ask a question that had been building within her since her conversation with Marin. "If I truly am descended from these wardens," she said carefully, watching Damien's reaction, "does that mean I might actually be able to help you, the way the woman in my dreams helped that ancient king?" Damien considered the question seriously, understanding how much courage it must have taken for her to voice such thoughts aloud. "Marin believes your abilities remain dormant until circumstances require them," he said slowly. "I do not know how such awakening occurs, or whether it happens gradually or suddenly. I worry more about the danger such abilities might place you in than I find comfort in the possibility of assistance." Elena nodded, though a part of her felt a quiet determination growing beneath her uncertainty. "Whatever sleeps within me," she said, "I would rather understand it than remain ignorant, especially if understanding might one day help protect you or your people." Damien reached out and gently took her hand, his amber eyes soft with an emotion he had not yet named aloud, though it lived clearly in every glance he offered her these days. "Elena," he said quietly, "I need you to understand something. My feelings for you have never depended on what abilities you might or might not possess. I care for you because of who you are, your kindness, your courage, your steady presence that calmed me the very first night we met. Whatever Marin's prophecies suggest, please do not feel pressured to become something simply because destiny might demand it of you." Elena felt tears prick unexpectedly at the corners of her eyes, moved by the sincerity in his words. "Thank you," she said softly. "Though I confess, part of me wants to understand this heritage regardless of what destiny may or may not require. My grandmother spent her life hiding this truth from me. I would like to finally understand what she felt necessary to conceal. That desire," Damien said gently, "I can certainly support." Over the following days, Damien arranged additional meetings between Elena and Marin, hoping the ancient seer might help Elena better understand the dormant heritage now beginning to stir within her. Marin taught Elena simple meditation techniques, ways of quieting her mind, that might help her connect with whatever ancestral knowledge remained buried within her blood. During one such session, seated beside the sacred fire that burned eternally at the heart of Pack territory, Elena felt something shift within her as she followed Marin's careful guidance, breathing slowly, allowing her mind to drift beyond ordinary awareness. Images flickered behind her closed eyes, clearer than her usual dreams, showing fragments of ceremonies where wardens pledged themselves to protect specific wolf bloodlines, ancient words spoken in a language that somehow felt familiar despite her conscious mind never having learned it. When she opened her eyes, Marin studied her with quiet satisfaction. "Your connection grows stronger," the old seer observed. "This is a promising sign, though we must proceed carefully. Forcing such awakening before you are ready could prove dangerous, both for you and for anyone standing nearby when your abilities finally surface." Elena absorbed this warning seriously, understanding that whatever power slept within her carried genuine risk alongside its potential benefits. "I will be patient," she promised, though privately she found herself growing increasingly curious about the strange sensations building within her, the way her palms sometimes tingled unexpectedly, as though anticipating a purpose she had not yet consciously discovered. Meanwhile, tension along Pack borders continued escalating as Kane's forces grew bolder in their activities. Reports reached Damien of hunter patrols venturing deeper into territory than they had dared in recent memory, testing boundaries, probing for weaknesses in Pack defenses. Corwin grew increasingly concerned during Pack Council meetings, urging Damien to consider more aggressive countermeasures before the hunters escalated further. We cannot simply wait for them to strike again, Corwin argued during one particularly tense meeting. Every day we delay allows them further opportunity to strengthen their position. Damien understood his beta's concerns, though he remained hesitant to escalate conflict without exhausting other options first. I do not wish for unnecessary bloodshed between our peoples, he said, but I agree we cannot remain passive indefinitely. Let us increase our own patrols, gather better intelligence about their numbers and intentions, before deciding on any aggressive action. The Pack Council reluctantly agreed to this measured approach, though underlying tension remained palpable throughout Pack territory, as the threat of open conflict loomed larger with each passing day. Damien found himself increasingly torn between his duties as Alpha King and his growing desire to spend every possible moment with Elena, understanding that circumstances beyond his control were pushing them both toward a confrontation neither of them could indefinitely avoid. One evening, as Elena walked through the forest gathering late-season herbs before winter fully arrived, she felt an unusual prickling sensation along her arms, the same instinctive warning Damien had taught her to recognize during their earlier lessons. She paused immediately, scanning her surroundings carefully, though nothing appeared visibly out of place among the familiar trees and undergrowth. Trust your instincts, she reminded herself, Damien's words echoing in her memory. She quickly gathered her remaining herbs and began making her way back toward her cottage, moving with purpose rather than her usual leisurely pace. She had nearly reached the tree line bordering her property when she spotted movement among the shadows ahead, a figure deliberately positioned to intercept her path home. Her heart began racing, though she forced herself to remain calm, remembering Damien's instruction to trust her instincts without succumbing to panic. "Good afternoon," the stranger said pleasantly enough, though something in his tone carried an edge that immediately confirmed Elena's suspicions. "I wonder if you might spare a few moments to answer some questions for me." Elena studied him carefully, noting the way his eyes assessed her with calculating precision rather than genuine curiosity. "I am afraid I am rather busy this afternoon," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear building within her chest. "Perhaps another time." The stranger's expression shifted subtly, any pretense of casual friendliness dropping away as he took a deliberate step closer. "I think you will find the time," he said, his voice carrying quiet menace. "Especially once you understand exactly what information I am seeking, and how it concerns your recent relationship with a certain wolf who visits you rather frequently." Elena's blood ran cold at his words, understanding immediately that this encounter was no accident. She glanced quickly toward her cottage, calculating whether she could reach safety before the stranger closed the remaining distance between them. "I do not know what you are referring to," she said, attempting to maintain a composed appearance despite her racing heartbeat. The stranger smiled coldly. "I think you know precisely what I mean. My employer has taken considerable interest in your unusual friendship with the Alpha King. He would very much like to discuss the matter with you directly." Before Elena could respond, she noticed additional movement among the trees, confirming her worst fears that this stranger had not come alone. Her mind raced through possibilities, remembering everything Damien had taught her about trusting her instincts and remaining alert to danger, though nothing had prepared her for the reality of facing armed hunters alone in the forest surrounding her own home. "I suggest you come quietly," the stranger continued, his hand resting meaningfully near a weapon holstered at his side. "It will make this considerably easier for everyone involved, including your wolf friend, whose safety currently depends entirely on your cooperation." Elena felt fear coil tightly in her stomach at the implicit threat against Damien, understanding that whatever happened next would determine far more than simply her own safety. She thought quickly, remembering the small emergency signal Damien had arranged, wondering if she could somehow alert Pack scouts before the situation escalated further beyond her control. "I will cooperate," she said carefully, buying herself precious seconds to think. "But I want assurance that no harm will come to anyone because of this." The stranger's smile widened slightly, mistaking her calculated response for simple fear rather than strategic thinking. "Of course," he said smoothly, though nothing in his tone offered genuine reassurance. "Now, if you would please come this way." As Elena stepped forward, seemingly compliant, she allowed her hand to brush against the small lantern hanging near her cottage door, tipping it deliberately so its light would flicker in an unusual pattern that Pack scouts had been trained to recognize as a signal of distress. She only hoped someone would notice in time, understanding that whatever Kane's hunters intended for her, the danger extended far beyond herself alone, threatening everyone and everything she had grown to care about since the night a wounded stranger first stumbled through her door seeking help she had never hesitated to provide. The Pack scout who noticed the flickering lantern that afternoon wasted no time reacting, recognizing immediately the distress signal Damien had established weeks earlier. He sent up a sharp howl that carried across the forest, a sound that brought Damien's head snapping up from the council meeting he had been attending, every instinct within him recognizing danger before his mind fully processed the meaning. Elena, he thought, already moving before Corwin could ask what was happening. He ran faster than he had ever moved before, cutting through the forest with reckless speed, guided by the scout's continued howls marking the direction of trouble. He arrived at the tree line bordering Elena's property just as the stranger who had confronted her attempted to force her toward a waiting group of armed men positioned deeper among the shadows. Damien did not hesitate. He shifted mid-stride, his human form melting into the powerful shape of a massive silver-furred wolf, closing the remaining distance in seconds. The hunters barely had time to react before he was among them, moving with a speed and ferocity that scattered their careful formation instantly. Elena, freed suddenly from the stranger's grip as chaos erupted around her, scrambled backward toward the safety of the tree line, watching in stunned amazement as Damien moved through the hunters with terrifying efficiency, disarming and incapacitating them one by one without inflicting the kind of permanent harm she might have expected from such a fierce confrontation. Within minutes, the remaining hunters fled into the deeper forest, abandoning their weapons in their haste to escape the Wolf King's wrath. Damien shifted back to his human form, rushing immediately to Elena's side, his expression a mixture of fury and desperate relief. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands moving over her carefully, checking for any sign of injury. "I am fine," Elena managed, though her voice trembled slightly with the aftermath of adrenaline and fear. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Damien pulled her into a tight embrace, relief flooding through him as he felt her heartbeat steady against his chest. "I should never have allowed you to remain in danger this long," he said quietly. "This ends now. You are coming to stay within Pack territory, where I can properly ensure your safety." Elena, still shaken but grateful for his protection, did not argue this time. She understood now, in a way she had not fully grasped before, exactly how real and immediate the threat against her had become. "I think that would be wise," she agreed softly. Over the following days, Elena settled into a small cottage within Pack territory, close enough to Damien's own dwelling that he could check on her frequently, yet private enough to allow her the independence she valued. Pack members, initially wary of a human presence within their protected lands, gradually began warming to her steady presence, impressed by her calm demeanor and evident skill with herbal remedies that proved useful for treating minor injuries among Pack members. Corwin, who had harbored the most significant reservations about Elena's growing role in Damien's life, found himself softening considerably after witnessing her genuine concern for Pack well-being, her willingness to learn their customs, her respect for traditions she did not fully understand but approached with sincere curiosity rather than dismissive judgment. "She is not what I expected," Corwin admitted to Damien one evening, watching from a distance as Elena helped an elderly Pack member with a persistent cough, patiently explaining the herbal remedy she prepared. "I confess I worried her presence would create complications we could not manage. Instead, she seems to bring an unusual calm to those around her." Damien smiled, watching Elena with open affection he no longer bothered concealing from his oldest friend. "She has that effect," he said. "I noticed it the very first night we met, though I did not understand then how deeply that calm would come to matter to me." As days passed into weeks, Elena and Damien's relationship deepened considerably, no longer constrained by the secrecy and caution that had characterized their earlier meetings. She learned Pack customs eagerly, participating in seasonal ceremonies that celebrated the changing moon, listening to ancient stories passed down through generations of Pack history that echoed strangely familiar themes from her own recurring dreams. Marin continued working with Elena during this period, helping her develop greater awareness of the dormant abilities stirring within her blood. During one particularly intense meditation session, Elena experienced a breakthrough that left both women startled by its intensity. As Elena's mind drifted into the meditative state Marin had taught her, her palm suddenly began glowing with faint silver light, warmth spreading through her entire arm before the sensation gradually faded. "This is remarkable progress," Marin said, studying the lingering silver traces along Elena's palm with fascination. "Your connection to your Warden heritage grows stronger each day. I believe, given enough time, you may fully awaken these dormant abilities before circumstances force the matter." Elena felt a complicated mixture of excitement and apprehension at this news, uncertain how she felt about abilities that seemed to carry such significant responsibility alongside their potential benefits. "What happens once these abilities fully awaken?" she asked. "Will I be bound to some ancient duty I never consciously chose?" Marin considered the question thoughtfully before answering. "The ancient pacts your ancestors made were not typically forced obligations," she said. They were choices, made freely by those who felt called to protect something they valued deeply. Whatever choice you eventually make regarding these abilities, it should remain entirely your own, regardless of what destiny or heritage might suggest. This reassurance eased some of Elena's uncertainty, though she continued grappling privately with questions about her own identity and the responsibilities that seemed to be gradually settling upon her shoulders, whether she consciously sought them or not. Meanwhile, despite the relative peace that had settled over Pack territory following Damien's decisive rescue, reports continued arriving of increased hunter activity along more distant borders. Kane, having failed in his attempt to capture Elena directly, appeared to be regrouping, gathering additional resources and support from other hunter factions, who shared his determination to eliminate the Wolf King and weaken Pack influence throughout the region. Damien remained vigilant despite the temporary calm, understanding that Kane's failure would likely only strengthen his resolve, rather than discourage him entirely. He increased Pack patrols significantly, coordinated more closely with allied packs in neighboring territories, and continued working with Marin to better understand exactly what Elena's emerging abilities might contribute to Pack defenses should circumstances eventually require it. One quiet evening, as autumn gave way to the first signs of approaching winter, Damien and Elena sat together beside a small fire outside her cottage, watching stars slowly emerge across the darkening sky. Elena leaned against him comfortably, feeling a contentment she had not expected to find amid such uncertain circumstances. "I never imagined my life taking this particular turn," she said softly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "A few months ago, I was simply a healer, treating occasional travelers passing through Ashwood Hollow. Now I find myself living among wolves, discovering ancient abilities I never knew I possessed, falling for a king I once treated as an ordinary wounded stranger." Damien pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head, warmth spreading through his chest at her words. "Life rarely follows the paths we originally imagined," he said quietly. "Though I confess, I find myself deeply grateful for whatever circumstances brought you into my life, regardless of the danger and uncertainty that accompanied your arrival." Elena tilted her head up to meet his gaze, something soft and certain passing between them in the firelight. "I am grateful too," she said simply, and Damien felt certain, in that quiet moment, that whatever challenges still awaited them, they would face them together, bound by a connection that felt increasingly like destiny rather than simple chance. Yet even as this fragile peace settled comfortably around them, neither could fully shake the awareness that Kane remained out there somewhere, patient and determined, waiting for his next opportunity to strike at the vulnerability he had already identified so precisely. The calm they currently enjoyed, both understood without needing to voice it aloud, was unlikely to last much longer. The moonrise gathering arrived with the first heavy frost of the season, an ancient ceremony that Pack tradition demanded be held beneath the full moon, to honor the changing seasons and reaffirm bonds between Pack members. Elena had heard about the gathering for weeks, watching preparations unfold throughout Pack territory with growing anticipation, though she had not fully understood the significance of such a public ceremony until Damien explained it more thoroughly the day before. "This gathering brings together not just our own pack," he told her, "but representatives from allied packs throughout the region. It is one of the few times each year when so many of our kind assemble in one place, celebrating unity and shared strength." Elena felt a flutter of nervousness at the prospect of attending such a significant event, uncertain how other packs might react to a human presence at such an important ceremony. "Will they accept me being there?" she asked. Damien squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You are under my protection, and increasingly, you are becoming an important part of this pack yourself. I have no doubt some may express curiosity, or even initial hesitation, but I trust you to handle their questions with the same grace you have shown consistently since we met." The evening of the gathering arrived clear and cold, stars scattered brilliantly across a sky, dominated by an enormous full moon that bathed the ceremonial grounds in silver light. Elena stood beside Damien, as Pack members and their allies gathered in ever-increasing numbers, the atmosphere charged with anticipation and reverence for the ancient traditions about to unfold. The ceremony began with traditional songs passed down through countless generations, voices rising together in a haunting melody that sent chills down Elena's spine despite the warmth of the bonfire crackling nearby. She watched, transfixed, as Pack elders performed rituals marking the changing seasons, their movements precise and deliberate, carrying weight of tradition stretching back centuries. Damien, as Alpha King, held a central role throughout the ceremony, and Elena watched with quiet pride as he addressed the assembled packs with confidence and genuine care for those under his leadership. She could see clearly why his people respected him so deeply, why loyalty to him ran so strong throughout Pact territory. It was during the ceremony's most sacred moment, as Damien stood before the assembled crowd delivering traditional words meant to bless the coming winter season, that chaos erupted without warning. The first gunshot cracked through the night air, shockingly loud against the previous reverent silence, followed immediately by shouts of alarm, as hunters emerged from the surrounding tree line in far greater numbers than anyone had anticipated. Cain had chosen his moment with calculated precision, understanding that the gathering represented not just an opportunity to strike at Damien directly, but a chance to deal a devastating blow against multiple pack alliances simultaneously. His forces poured from the darkness, weapons raised, silver ammunition gleaming with deadly promise beneath the moonlight. Pandemonium spread instantly through the ceremonial grounds as pack members scrambled to respond, shifting into their wolf forms to defend against the sudden assault. Damien moved quickly to organize resistance, shouting commands that cut through the chaos with practiced authority, though even his quick reactions could not prevent every hunter's shot from finding a target among the confused crowd. Elena, caught in the disorder, searched frantically for Damien among the swirling chaos, her heart pounding with fear, not for herself, but for the man she had grown to love so completely over recent months. She spotted him finally, positioned dangerously close to the tree line as he worked to redirect fleeing pack members towards safety, unaware that Cain himself had emerged from the shadows behind him, rifle raised and aimed directly at his exposed back. Time seemed to slow as Elena watched the scene unfold, understanding instantly that Damien would not see the danger in time to avoid it. Something within her, some instinct buried deep in blood that had waited generations to finally awaken, surged forward with sudden overwhelming clarity. She moved without conscious thought, her body responding to danger with a speed and certainty she had never before possessed, crossing the distance between herself and Damien, faster than should have been humanly possible. The gunshot rang out just as she reached him, throwing herself directly into the path of the bullet meant for his heart. The impact struck her chest with tremendous force, yet instead of the searing pain she expected, Elena felt something entirely different, a strange warmth spreading rapidly through her body, as silver blue light rippled visibly beneath her skin, absorbing the deadly metal's poison before it could cause lasting damage. "Elena," Damien shouted, spinning around just in time to catch her as she staggered from the impact, his heart seizing with terror at the sight of blood staining her clothing where the bullet had struck. But Elena, though shaken and gasping from the force of impact, remained conscious, her eyes wide with her own astonishment as she stared down at the wound already beginning to seal itself, the silver light beneath her skin slowly fading as her body completed whatever ancient process had just occurred. "I am all right," she managed, though her voice trembled with shock at what had just happened. "I do not entirely understand what occurred, but I believe I just did exactly what those old stories described." Around them the battle continued raging, though Damien found himself frozen for a crucial moment, torn between overwhelming relief that Elena remained alive, and stunned comprehension of what her actions had just revealed about her true nature. Cain, watching from a short distance away, wore an expression of similar shock, having witnessed something that contradicted everything his years of hunting experience had taught him to expect. "A warden," Cain murmured to himself, understanding dawning with unwelcome clarity. She truly is one of them. This revelation, rather than deterring Cain, seemed only to sharpen his determination, recognizing immediately that Elena's abilities represented an even greater obstacle to his plans than he had previously anticipated, one that would require considerably more strategic planning to overcome. He signaled retreat to his remaining forces, understanding that continuing the current confrontation without adjusting his approach would likely result in significant losses for his cause. As Cain's hunters withdrew into the surrounding darkness, pack members slowly regrouped, tending to the wounded and assessing the damage inflicted during the sudden assault. Several pack members had sustained injuries, though thankfully none proved fatal, and the overall damage remained considerably less severe than it might have been had Elena not intervened so decisively at the crucial moment. Damien knelt beside Elena, still processing everything that had just unfolded, his hands trembling slightly as he examined the healed wound on her chest where the bullet had struck moments earlier. "You saved my life," he said quietly, disbelief and gratitude mingling in his voice. "You threw yourself in front of a silver bullet meant to kill me. I could not simply stand aside and watch you die," Elena said simply, though exhaustion from whatever ancient process had just occurred within her body left her feeling drained and slightly disoriented. "I do not fully understand what just happened, but something within me knew exactly what to do the moment I saw that weapon aimed at you." Marin, who had witnessed the entire exchange from a nearby vantage point, approached slowly, her expression a complex mixture of awe and vindication at seeing her earlier predictions finally confirmed so dramatically. "The prophecy has finally revealed itself completely," she said, studying Elena with newfound reverence. "You are indeed a warden, awakened fully now through necessity rather than gradual discovery. This changes everything moving forward, both for you personally and for the entire Pack's understanding of the war we face against Kane's forces." Elena absorbed this confirmation with a strange mixture of relief and lingering uncertainty, understanding that whatever destiny had been building toward this moment throughout her entire life had finally arrived, undeniable and impossible to ignore any longer. She looked up at Damien, searching his expression for any sign of how this revelation might change things between them. Damien, seeming to understand exactly what she was searching for, reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, his amber eyes filled with unmistakable warmth despite the chaos still settling around them following the attack. "Nothing about who you are to me has changed," he said firmly. "If anything, understanding fully what you are, what you have sacrificed and continue sacrificing to protect me, only deepens everything I already felt for you. You are extraordinary, Elena, in every possible sense of that word." Elena felt tears gathering unexpectedly at his words, overwhelmed by everything that had transpired throughout the evening, from the terror of the sudden attack, to the shocking revelation of her own true nature, to the steady certainty of Damien's continued devotion despite everything that had just changed between them. As Pack members began the difficult work of clearing away evidence of the attack and tending to their wounded, Damien remained close beside Elena throughout the remainder of the night, understanding that whatever challenges still awaited them in confronting Kane's determined pursuit, they would face them now with a clearer understanding of exactly what Elena's remarkable heritage might contribute to their shared fight for survival and peace. News of Elena's true nature spread quickly throughout Pack territory following the attack, carried by those who had witnessed her remarkable intervention firsthand, and repeated with growing wonder among those who had only heard second-hand accounts of what transpired during the Moonrise gathering. Pack members who had previously regarded Elena with polite tolerance now looked upon her with genuine reverence, understanding that the ancient legends about wardens capable of shielding wolves from silver were not simply stories passed down through generations, but living truth embodied in the quiet healer who had settled among them. Corwin, perhaps more than anyone besides Damien himself, found himself deeply moved by what Elena had done, understanding fully now why fate seemed to have drawn her so persistently into their lives, despite the danger surrounding such a connection. "I owe you an apology," he told her during a quiet visit to her cottage several days after the attack. "I doubted the wisdom of Damien's growing attachment to you, worried that a human presence would only complicate matters and increase vulnerability within the Pack. I could not have been more wrong about the value you bring to us." Elena, still adjusting to her newfound status within Pack society, offered him a warm smile despite her continued exhaustion from the toll her awakened abilities had taken on her body. "Your caution was reasonable, given everything you did not yet understand about my circumstances," she said. "I hold no resentment for concerns rooted in genuine care for your Pack's well-being." Corwin nodded, gratitude evident in his expression. "Regardless, you have earned my complete respect and loyalty. Should you ever need anything, know that you have my support without reservation." As days passed following the attack, Marin worked closely with Elena to help her better understand and control the abilities that had so dramatically awakened during the crisis at the Moonrise gathering. Elena discovered that her connection to this ancient heritage brought with it not just the capacity to absorb Silver's poison, but a range of other subtle abilities that had likely served her ancestors well during the original conflict between wolves and humans centuries earlier. She found she could sense danger with heightened clarity, an instinctive awareness that extended beyond simple observation to something closer to genuine premonition. She discovered an unusual affinity for herbs and remedies that seemed to work more effectively in her hands than they ever had before her full awakening, as though her connection to this warden heritage enhanced abilities she had already possessed as a healer. Most significantly, she learned that her touch alone could ease the pain of silver poisoning in wolves who had not yet been struck directly, drawing latent poison from wounds with remarkable efficiency compared to the traditional remedies she had once relied upon exclusively. This discovery proved immediately valuable as Pack healers began working alongside Elena to treat those injured during the recent attack, her unique abilities significantly accelerating recovery times for several Pack members who had sustained serious silver-related injuries. Damien watched this transformation in Elena with a complex mixture of pride and continued concern, understanding that her growing confidence in these abilities also meant she would likely feel compelled to use them in increasingly dangerous circumstances as the conflict with Kane continued escalating. He found himself torn between admiration for her courage and a persistent worry that her willingness to sacrifice herself for others, demonstrated so dramatically during the attack, might one day lead her into danger from which even her remarkable abilities could not protect her. "I need you to promise me something," he told her one evening, as they sat together reviewing reports about Kane's continued movements throughout the region. "Whatever abilities you now possess, please do not treat your own safety as something expendable. I understand your instinct to protect others, but I could not bear losing you, regardless of how remarkable your capacity for self-sacrifice might be." Elena considered his words seriously, understanding the genuine fear underlying his request. "I cannot promise to never place myself in danger for those I care about," she said honestly. "That instinct feels fundamental to who I am, separate even from whatever ancient heritage now flows more fully through my blood. But I promise to be thoughtful, to weigh risks carefully rather than acting purely from impulse, and to trust in my abilities rather than assuming certain death whenever danger arises." Damien accepted this compromise, understanding it represented the most realistic promise Elena could genuinely offer given her fundamental nature. He drew her close, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, grateful beyond words for the woman who had somehow become so essential to both his personal happiness and, increasingly, to the survival of his entire pack. Meanwhile, reports continued arriving about Kane's activities following his failed assault at the Moonrise Gathering. Rather than retreating entirely, he appeared to be gathering additional resources, recruiting hunters from distant regions who specialized in confronting supernatural threats, studying whatever historical records existed about wardens and their capabilities, in hopes of developing new strategies to counter Elena's unexpected intervention. Damien's scouts reported increased hunter activity along multiple border regions, suggesting Kane intended to launch a more coordinated and substantial assault than his previous attempts. Understanding that direct confrontation with both the Alpha King and his newly revealed Warden ally would require significantly greater resources than his earlier ambushes had employed. The Pack Council convened repeatedly during this period, debating strategy and preparation for whatever confrontation Kane might be planning next. Elena, now recognized as possessing genuine value to Pack defense strategies, found herself included in these discussions for the first time, her insights about Warden capabilities proving valuable as the Pack considered how best to prepare for future conflicts. "I believe my abilities extend beyond simply absorbing silver from wounds already inflicted," she suggested during one such council meeting, drawing on knowledge that seemed to surface increasingly from somewhere deep within her awakened blood. "I sense I may also be capable of creating some manner of protective barrier, though I do not yet fully understand how to consciously access or control such an ability." Marin nodded thoughtfully at this suggestion. The ancient texts do mention barriers created by particularly powerful wardens, though such abilities typically required considerable practice and experience to master fully. "Perhaps, given time, we might work together to help you develop this potential capability before circumstances force its emergence unexpectedly, as happened with your initial awakening." Elena agreed readily, eager to understand and develop whatever capabilities might help protect Damien and his pack from the growing threat Kane represented. Over subsequent weeks, she dedicated considerable time to training alongside Marin, gradually developing greater control over her abilities, learning to consciously access the silver light that had once emerged only through instinctive crisis response. This period of preparation brought Elena and Damien even closer together, their shared purpose in defending against Kane's threat, deepening the emotional bond that had been building steadily since their very first meeting. Damien found himself increasingly confident that whatever confrontation awaited them, they would face it together, complementing each other's strengths in ways that made their combined resistance to Kane's forces considerably more formidable than either might have managed separately. Yet even as this growing partnership brought genuine hope for successfully confronting the danger threatening their community, both understood that Kane remained a patient and resourceful adversary, one unlikely to launch his next assault until he felt genuinely confident of achieving decisive victory. The question remained not whether Kane would strike again, but when, and whether their preparations would prove sufficient to withstand whatever devastating assault he was currently planning in the shadows beyond Pack territory. The attack came sooner than anyone anticipated, arriving with the first heavy snowfall of winter, when Kane apparently calculated that harsh weather conditions might work to his advantage against Pack defenses. Scouts brought word just before dawn that a substantial force of hunters, larger than any previous assault, had crossed into the outer regions of Pack territory, moving with clear purpose toward the heart of Ashwood Hollow itself. Damien mobilized Pack forces immediately upon receiving this warning, coordinating with allied packs who had pledged support following the assault at the Moonrise Gathering. Elena, now fully integrated into Pack defense strategies, prepared alongside the warriors, her confidence in her abilities having grown considerably through weeks of careful training with Marin's guidance. "This is it," Damien said quietly, as he and Elena stood together reviewing final preparations before the anticipated confrontation. "Whatever happens today will likely determine the future of our territory, perhaps even the broader conflict between our peoples that has continued for generations." Elena reached for his hand, steadying herself with the same calm certainty that had first drawn him to her months earlier. "We face this together," she said firmly. "Whatever Kane has planned, he has clearly underestimated exactly what we have built here, both in terms of pack unity and my own awakened capabilities." As dawn broke fully over the snow-covered landscape, Kane's forces emerged from the tree line surrounding Ashwood Hollow in numbers considerably greater than previous encounters. Heavily armed with silver ammunition and additional weapons Damien's scouts had never previously encountered, likely acquired through Kane's recent efforts to gather resources from distant hunting factions. The battle that followed proved fierce and prolonged, pack warriors fighting alongside allied wolves from neighboring territories, defending their homes with fierce determination against Kane's relentless assault. Elena moved through the chaos with newfound purpose, her abilities proving invaluable as she worked to neutralize silver traps that Kane's forces had scattered throughout the battlefield, drawing poison from wounded pack members with remarkable efficiency that kept many fighters in the conflict who might otherwise have been forced to retreat. At one particularly critical moment, as Kane's forces pressed hard against a weakening section of pack defense, Elena felt something shift within her, an instinctive understanding of exactly what her ancestors' barrier abilities might accomplish if she could just access them consciously, rather than waiting for crisis to force their emergence. She closed her eyes briefly, drawing on everything Marin had taught her, focusing her intention with deliberate purpose rather than pure instinct. Silver-blue light began radiating outward from her position, spreading across the battlefield in a shimmering wave that neutralized the poison within nearby silver weapons, rendering them temporarily harmless against the pack warriors fighting desperately to hold their ground. Kane's forces, suddenly finding their primary advantage stripped away, faltered visibly, confusion and alarm spreading through their ranks as their carefully planned assault began unraveling before their eyes. Damien, fighting nearby in his powerful wolf form, felt the shift in momentum immediately, understanding that Elena's successful mastery of this new ability represented a turning point in the ongoing conflict. He redoubled his own efforts, rallying pack warriors to press their advantage while Kane's forces remained disoriented by the sudden loss of their weapons' effectiveness. Kane himself, observing the battlefield from a defensive position near the tree line, recognized with growing alarm that his carefully constructed strategy was failing catastrophically against defenses he had not adequately anticipated. He had planned for direct confrontation with the Alpha King, had prepared countermeasures against ordinary pack resistance, but Elena's fully awakened warden capabilities represented a variable his extensive planning had failed to properly account for. Retreat, he finally ordered his remaining forces, understanding that continuing the current assault would likely result in devastating losses without achieving his intended objectives. His hunters began withdrawing, though not without continued resistance from pack warriors determined to press their sudden advantage as far as possible. As Kane himself attempted to withdraw alongside his retreating forces, Damien broke away from the main conflict, pursuing the hunter leader with focused determination, understanding that capturing or eliminating Kane directly might finally bring an end to the persistent threat he had represented for months. Elena, sensing the danger in this pursuit, followed as quickly as her abilities allowed, unwilling to let Damien face this final confrontation entirely alone. She arrived just as Damien cornered Kane near the edge of a frozen stream. The hunter leader realizing he had exhausted his options for escape, his remaining forces having scattered during the chaotic retreat. "This ends now," Damien said, his wolf form shifting back to human as he confronted the man who had caused so much devastation and fear throughout recent months. Kane, despite his precarious position, maintained a defiant expression, though Elena could see genuine fear flickering behind his eyes, as he recognized the hopelessness of his current circumstances. "You cannot eliminate what I represent simply by defeating me personally," he said, his voice carrying bitter conviction. "Others share my cause. Others will continue this fight, regardless of what happens here today." "Perhaps," Damien acknowledged, though his tone carried unwavering resolve, "but your particular threat ends today, one way or another." Elena, watching this final confrontation unfold, felt conflicted about what outcome might follow, understanding the deep hurt and loss that had driven Kane's relentless pursuit of conflict, yet unable to excuse the violence and danger he had inflicted upon innocent people throughout his campaign against Damien's pack. "Damien," she said quietly, stepping closer. Perhaps there is another path forward, one that does not require further bloodshed on either side. Damien glanced at her, understanding immediately what she was suggesting, weighing the wisdom of her proposed mercy against his instinct to permanently eliminate the threat Cain had represented for so long. After a long moment of consideration, he made his decision. Cain will face judgment, he said finally, though not through further violence today. He will be held accountable through proper means, given opportunity to answer for his actions before those he has harmed, rather than facing simple execution in this moment of victory. Cain, clearly surprised by this unexpected mercy, said nothing, as pack warriors moved to secure him, understanding that whatever fate awaited him now, at least his life would continue, offering perhaps eventual opportunity for genuine accountability, rather than simple elimination through violence. As the battle's aftermath settled across Ashwood Hollow, pack members began the difficult work of tending to wounded warriors, clearing away evidence of the conflict, and beginning to process the significant victory they had achieved against Cain's forces. Elena moved among the wounded, her abilities proving invaluable in treating those injured during the extended confrontation, her presence a source of genuine comfort and healing for a community that had endured considerable trauma throughout the difficult conflict. Damien, watching Elena work tirelessly to help those injured during the battle, felt overwhelming gratitude and admiration for the woman who had become so essential to both his personal happiness and the survival of everyone under his protection. Whatever challenges still remained in fully resolving the broader conflict between wolves and hunters throughout the region, he felt genuine confidence that the most immediate and personal threat to his people had finally been successfully addressed, thanks in no small part to the remarkable courage and capability of the woman he had grown to love so completely since that fateful night she first pulled Silver from his wounded shoulder. Winter settled fully over Ashwood Hollow in the weeks following the decisive battle against Cain's forces, bringing with it a sense of peace that had felt impossible to imagine during the months of mounting danger and uncertainty. Cain himself remained held within pack custody, awaiting the promised accountability Damien had insisted upon, rather than simple elimination, a decision that had earned considerable respect from allied packs throughout the region who recognized the wisdom and restraint such mercy represented. Elena found herself settling comfortably into her new life within pack territory, her role as both healer and warden increasingly recognized and valued throughout the community. Pack members who had once regarded her with cautious curiosity now approached her with genuine warmth and respect, understanding fully the sacrifice and courage she had demonstrated repeatedly throughout the conflict that had threatened their entire way of life. One crisp morning, as the first gentle signs of returning warmth began appearing despite winter's continued grip on the landscape, Damien approached Elena with an expression that carried unusual nervousness, quite different from his typically confident bearing as Alpha King. "I have something important to discuss with you," he said, guiding her toward a quiet clearing that held special significance within pack tradition, a place typically reserved for the most important ceremonies and decisions affecting pack future. Elena felt her heart quicken slightly at his evident nervousness, wondering what significant matter he wished to discuss in such a meaningful location. "Whatever it is," she said gently, "you know you can share anything with me." Damien took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts carefully before speaking. "Elena, since the very night you first pulled Silver from my wounded shoulder, my life has changed in ways I never anticipated possible. You have shown me courage I did not know existed, taught me that vulnerability and strength are not opposites but companions, and demonstrated repeatedly that love, genuine and selfless, remains possible even amid the greatest danger and uncertainty." Elena felt tears gathering unexpectedly at his words, understanding the significance building within this moment even before he continued. "I know that our path together has been unconventional," Damien continued, his expression growing increasingly earnest. "You came into my life as an unexpected stranger who saved me without hesitation, revealed yourself gradually to be far more remarkable than either of us initially understood, and have consistently chosen to stand beside me despite every danger and complication that choice has brought into your life." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, an intricately carved pendant that Elena recognized immediately as bearing traditional pack symbols associated with the ceremony of claiming a mate, the deepest and most significant bond recognized within wolf society. "Elena," he said, his voice carrying unmistakable sincerity and hope, "I would like to formally claim you as my Luna, my mate and equal partner in leading this pack forward. Not simply because prophecy or destiny suggested our paths were meant to intertwine, but because I genuinely love you, completely and without reservation, for exactly who you are." Elena felt overwhelming emotion flooding through her at his words, understanding fully the depth of commitment such a claiming ceremony represented within pack tradition, understanding equally that her own feelings for Damien had grown just as deep and certain throughout the months they had shared together. "Yes," she said simply, her voice thick with emotion. "I would be honored to accept that claiming, Damien. You have shown me a life richer and more meaningful than I ever imagined possible, and I want nothing more than to continue building that life together with you, whatever challenges the future might still bring." The formal claiming ceremony took place several weeks later, beneath another full moon that bathed the ceremonial grounds in the same silver light that had first illuminated Elena's remarkable intervention during the attack at the Moonrise Gathering. Pack members from Damien's own territory gathered alongside representatives from allied packs throughout the region, all eager to witness the union between their Alpha King and the remarkable Warden who had proven herself so completely devoted to protecting both him personally and the broader pack community. Marin presided over the traditional ceremony, her weathered face carrying evident satisfaction at witnessing the fulfillment of prophecies she had first sensed, disturbing the ancient currents months earlier. As she spoke the traditional words binding Damien and Elena together as mates and equal leaders of the pack, Elena felt the crescent moon birthmark on her wrist grow warm, pulsing gently in rhythm with something that felt deeply right and complete. Corwin, standing nearby as witness to the ceremony, felt genuine joy watching his oldest friend finally find the happiness and partnership he had long deserved, understanding now completely why fate had worked so persistently to bring Elena into their lives, despite every obstacle and danger that connection had initially represented. As the ceremony concluded and celebration began throughout pack territory, Damien drew Elena close, his amber eyes filled with warmth and certainty, as he looked upon the woman who had become his equal partner in every meaningful sense. "We have faced considerable danger together already," he said quietly, though happiness colored his voice. "Whatever challenges the future still holds, I feel confident we can overcome them together, exactly as we have already proven ourselves capable of doing." Elena smiled, leaning into his embrace with complete contentment. "I believe you are right," she said softly, "though I suspect our story is really only just beginning, rather than concluding here tonight." As celebration continued throughout the evening, pack members sharing traditional food and stories while children played happily among the adults, Elena found herself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. From a simple herbalist treating occasional travelers passing through Ashwood Hollow, to the mate and equal partner of an Alpha King, protector of an entire pack community through abilities she had never known she possessed, until circumstance and courage combined to reveal them fully. The war that had once threatened to consume everything she cared about had transformed instead into the foundation for a life richer and more meaningful than she had ever imagined possible, built not through walls or weapons, but through genuine love, mutual respect, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for those who mattered most. As the full moon continued its steady journey across the winter sky above Ashwood Hollow, Elena felt certain that whatever the future held, she and Damien would face it together, bound not simply by ancient prophecy or ancestral duty, but by a love that had proven itself capable of shielding against even the deadliest silver, and stronger than any danger that might yet threaten to divide them.